We began our living wall project by making the frame. We headed over to Kimmel Lumber and Mike selected cedar wood that would hold up well out in the elements. It was amazing how these 16-foot boards fit inside his van. Back at the Keystone project, the men used the joiner to carve holes in the wood and use these dominoes to hold it together tight. Here Dylan is hammering in the dominoes that they pre-buy. Dylan and Mike are going to join the 45-degree cut corners here with the dominoes and wood glue that will hold it super tight while it's holding up all the weight of the plants, the fabric, the frame, the wood up on the wall. The corners they cut fit like a glove. They did add some screws to the top and bottom where people would not see them.
That's rebuilt better, bigger and better.
I know, I rebuilt that. I don't know about this.
The guys are now going to hang the cedar wood box up on the wall. Mike attached some 2x4s to the cinder block. And if he measured right, it should fit just perfectly. Good work is always worth observing. The patio we poured has a slight angle to it, so Mike was double checking because there's an optical illusion that it's not precise, but it is. We found these mesh grates for the plants at Tractor Supply for an incredible deal, and Mike built the box to fit 4 of them exactly when we trimmed off a few of the squares. Now that they know it's going to fit perfectly, they're taking it down. They're going to prime it, and they're going to paint it the brown of the fascia. Dylan is taking sandpaper to the corners where they joined each side to make sure that they're perfectly smooth. Here she is now in all her glory. Our brown painted cedar wood box that will hold our living wall. Here's a view of the rest of the patio. Building is not done yet, but we want the plants to grow in before the project is finished. The next day was super rainy and drizzly. When Mike and I did a ton of work, we got pretty wet. Here he had installed the drip line, and he is measuring so that we can have 2 emitters per plant square, as per Florafelt's directions to us. He turned on the water, and the emitters were not in the end ones yet, so it came pouring out. Now with the emitters hanging on the line, it's sagging a bit, so he had to add some more support. Meanwhile, I started measuring the Florafelt to be laced through the wire mesh. We needed to lace it through before he installed it. I figured out the length was exactly 3 of my arm lengths. We have 7 sections per square, and there's 4 squares, so you can do the math. I had to cut 28 strips out of 6 rolls of 6-inch Florafelt. And then I began the process of tucking them in, just like I saw on the Florafelt website. Oh, look at the spider web. As I finished a section, Mike would attach it to the frame. So the fabric is wedged up on the top near the emitters, but in front of it so we don't see them. And here he was attaching each of the frames to each other with zip ties. I tucked in all the bottom felt, but you'll see me go back and cut it away later. We headed over to Lowe's. I had researched 8 different nurseries only to find exactly what I needed at Lowe's Home Improvement. We went with tropical indoor plants because our living wall is always in the shade, even though it's outside. And we do live in Florida, so there's lots of moisture and humidity for our plants. We got a bunch of hanging baskets, knowing that we could subdivide the plants into smaller sections. We loaded up the extra soil, loaded up the plants. It's a good thing we have his big van. Back at the project, I got a view of all the lovely plants that we had chosen inside the van. Because it was so rainy, I set up shop inside this unfinished office. Laid everything out to get ready to plant 252 plants in our living wall. We ended up using 2 of the 3 bags of soil. I found some measuring devices in the shop, grabbed my lunch, and got to work. Here I'm looking at the bags of perlite and vermiculite I bought that I recommended for hydroponic planting. I didn't figure it would hurt for them to hold some extra water in them. This is a Swiss cheese monstera plant, which is my absolute favorite. And I subdivided the pots. Each one gave me about 3 or 4 planters. I wrapped them up in the Florafelt, tucked them around like a diaper basically, and wrapped a rubber band around them twice. This plant we have 2 different kinds of. We have a red vein, and this one's called Juanita, the pink one. I just grouped them randomly together, red and pink. Aren't they cute in their little bundles? This is the original plan that I did with research, how many plants I would need of each, so that when we went to Lowe's, we knew exactly what we needed. And I did come up with a diagram so that we'd have an idea of where to stick the plant. When I knew where a plant needed to go, I checked it on the diagram and then I marked it off with painter's tape so that I wouldn't mess up the plan. Oh, how I love these Swiss cheese monstera. There they are, just the monstera. Now I'm getting ready for the next plant. This one is very breakable, so you have to be very careful with it. And it was all tangled together, but I was able to separate each plant into 2 or 3. But I had to be really careful not to break it. Separated it out, added the vermiculite and more soil, wrapped them up, and put them in the living wall. Next up, I had several bromeliads that will just be some random different spots of color as they grow. Right now, they're pretty tiny. I got 3 in a pot as a really good deal. Meanwhile, the guys were working on a drainage situation we had. Oh, there's some of the other plants and a whole ton of the Juanita and red vein, making the little bundles and then putting them on the wall. They're so cute. I marked off new areas where the Juanita and red vein went. And this is what it's looking like halfway through. So exciting. It's really coming together. I wanted to check if the water drip system was working, but as you can see, it was dry on the bottom. We had to fool around with this a bit because the water was coming through, but for some reason it wasn't hitting all the plants. So I kept checking that. Meanwhile, my friend Megan came over to help me the next day. Ended up taking about 3 half days of work to wrap 252 plants and place them in the living wall. There's 2 different kinds of pothos on the wall. This is called a neon pothos, and I bought it for its bright green color, knowing that it would add some interest, something different. We also have some asparagus fern we're putting in here. Megan wrapped up her time helping me out, and we got the neon pothos all installed. Up next is what's called moonlight pothos, and it's really beautiful with its silvery leaves. This was the last plant to get up on the wall. It was super exciting to be almost done. Here is reveal number 1. When I first finished the plant wall, this is what it looked like. But keep watching because I did have to do some rearranging. Because this was a DIY frame, there was one thing Mike and I did not account for, and that was how the lower squares would have no room to hang. So were we to do this again, we would have to leave a gap between the metal and the bottom. We came up with the idea to add zip ties to hold the plants in place, otherwise they fell straight on the ground. So I installed the zip ties across the bottom, rearranged the fabric to loop over it and tuck under, and then I was able to replace all the plants along the bottom in a way that they will hold in, not maintain too much water, and be able to drip out the bottom. While I had a bunch of plants out of the bottom, I decided I wanted to rearrange. I didn't like the uneven spacing, but you can see there's a bit of a V pattern to my layout, but I just wasn't satisfied with the unevenness of it, even though a lot of people voted that I do a random design. The slight OCD that I have couldn't handle it. So I rearranged quite a bit, moved some ferns up high, moved the pothos down, and debated what else I should do. Where could they go to look better? In the end, I decided I wanted the neon pothos framing the whole box on both sides. So I moved them all the way out to the right and left, moved the Juanita and red vein more towards the middle next to the moonlight pothos. This alignment definitely made me happier. Truly one of the joys of the Florafelt system using the plant root wraps is that you can easily move plants, change where they are, take out dead ones so easily just with the felt and the rubber bands. I have definitely touched every plant on this wall to rearrange at some point. After rearranging, I checked every plant to make sure they were receiving water. And amazingly, most of the top plants were not receiving water. You can see here by where I marked with blue tape how many rows the top plant did not have water. This was a conundrum to me, why the top plants closest to the emitters were not even wet. As I thought about it overnight, I realized there was too much fabric on the top and one of the layers was not receiving water, so I cut out the extra fabric. Here's the final reveal, but I also found one more problem. Florafelt told me I didn't have enough dirt in my pockets, so my friend Sue and I rewrapped all 252 plants with more soil. Over the weekend, it rained, and I really got to see how the living wall did with the extra precipitation. How will the plants do with extra waterings? How do they deal with the sun? Did I choose the right plants? So many questions had to be answered as time proceeded after planting the wall. One day when I came by, I found a cute little friend. Apparently, we made him a new habitat. Another day, I checked, and look, roots were coming through just like they're designed to do. After all of that, 3 weeks later, this is what the plant wall looks like. It's already filling in nicely. I got our side tree in, our garden gate. Our Florafelt DIY Pro System living wall just looks amazing.